Hello everyone, here I am in my office and I am going to try a different format for doing these videos. I don't know if this is going to work or not. I may delete this one. But for this semester, I want to make sure that we have a way to talk about this material, and I'm going to try and do it in video short style. There we go. So, the first thing I want to talk about is man, I hate talking without people. Um, so, the first thing I want to talk about is where we're at in the world right now. I do believe that one of the best things you can take away from this class, your college education, long after you've forgotten any of the individual bits, is going to be your ability to be a critical thinker. Now, I know that everybody says being a critical thinker is one of the most important things you're going to get from your college education, and but sometimes people have a hard time defining that. So I'm going to give you 3 or 4 different elements, I think, of being a critical thinker, and then I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why that's especially important in this particular environment we're in at the moment. So when philosophers study how we know what we think we know, we call that epistemology. And right now, I think we're in the middle of what we might call an epistemological crisis. For a variety of reasons, which we can get into later if you care. We are living in a world where if you're reading the news, you're reading news on sites which show you news you like. If you're a Fox News person, chances are you're visiting Fox and other sites. If you're an MSNBC person, then you're getting your news from those sites. And the way that the algorithms on the internet work, they know which sites you like, and they give you more and more and more of that. A second part of that, it's very easy to live in a bubble, and we've been talking about that for years. That's not all that surprising. So the second part of that is that given the way the internet has developed over the past, let's say 10 to 20 years, we've got fewer and fewer and fewer actual news people out there doing reporting. And what that means is that when you're reading news on the internet, it may or may not be written by someone who was actually there and saw whatever it was that's going on that they're reporting on. It may be rewritten, it may be that they're reporting stuff they've read on the internet, and the advertising model that drives, so there are just fewer news people actually collecting information than there used to be. The reason for that is that in the past, there were fewer channels for getting news. There were, the funding model for newspapers and TV news was pretty stable, and so you hired reporters. They went out, they got the news, and they reported it. And you actually had reporters working for your local newspaper in a town like Macon. You had more TV reporters, and everybody would watch ABC, NBC, CBS News, and that was, it was understood that that's where good news was. Cable news is a little bit of a problem, or let me restate that. Cable news created a little bit of a problem when it came to funding because uh, they eventually had to have people on 24/7 talking about the news. CBS News in 1985 put out a half-hour news program every day, and that got you what you needed. CNN now has to run programs 24 hours a day, and that's happening at the same time we've got fewer and fewer reporters. So part of what ends up happening there is those sites end up showing you opinion and dressing it as news, right? So they'll have people talking about the news, but they're not actually telling you the news. The third component, which goes along with all of that, is that outrage sells. So the funding models that we do have now are driven by clicking and sharing, and people click on the things that make them mad. They share it to their friends who have similar opinions. And so the news that ends up getting sent around and going viral, if you were, is not necessarily news, but it is the most egregious, most outrageous stuff. You know, in the old days, you would have said, if it bleeds, it leads. You know, people have maybe they have an innate tendency to want to see, you know, the story about the car crash. But in what that's evolved to now is that every story is a car crash. And when there aren't car crashes, somebody invents something outrageous or describes a scenario as outrageous and sends that around. And you click on it, and you know BuzzFeed gets paid. I don't even know if BuzzFeed's around anymore, but so it goes. So in short, outrage sells. And what that means is that where in 1988, before the internet, you could read the evening paper, you could watch the 10 o'clock news for your local information, you could watch ABC, CBS, NBC, Dan Rather for a half hour and get the news of the nation and the world. And you were a fairly informed citizen, and you had a fair amount of confidence in the information that you were getting. In today's world, there are few people on the ground collecting the information. What is going around is often rewritten, repurposed, reshared. Opinion is added as if that was actually something meaningful, and the stuff that does get put out there is the most outrageous stuff, jaw-dropping, so that it'll get traction. That means that right now we're living in something of an epistemological crisis, insofar as when you go to see the news, you don't actually know what's news and what's not. When you layer in the increasingly good AI capabilities to where you don't necessarily know if a story was written by a human, you don't really know if a picture was manipulated or not. Now we're actually in a world that situation has gotten much, much, much worse. So that's why I think understanding how to do critical thinking is more important now than it ever was. And so, all right, I'm going to kill this one and start a critical thinking one next.